What's up everyone and welcome back to the World History Channel. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button today. Let's get started. From Queen of France to homeless beggar. The rise and catastrophic downfall of Marie de Medici. When Marie de Medici married King Henri IV in 1600, France was a nation torn apart by years of religious and civil wars. It was one of the most unhappy royal marriages ever. She watched and waited for her opportunity to strike for years, desperate for power, as her husband attempted to exert control over a nation bent on internal destruction. After 10 years of marriage, she was finally crowned Queen of France in her own right. The very next day, her husband was conveniently murdered by a fanatical priest, and Marie took control of the kingdom for herself. She ruled France with an iron fist and made a lot of enemies in the process. Unlike other queens, however, Marie was not a royal by birth, and her position was precarious. The Dowager Queen went to war against her own son to hold on to power, and at times she believed she won the day, but her attempts were doomed to fail. Marie's story is one of epic rises, and her cultural legacy endures into the 21st century. She ended her days as a poor beggar woman who was dependent on the generosity of the painter Peter Paul Rubens and exiled forever by her own son. But her fall from power was so complete. The King of France was desperate for heirs and Marie was fertile and wealthy. After Henri IV of France's first marriage to Marguerite de Valois, also a Medici through her mother, was annulled in 1599. He married Marie de Medici in an elaborate ceremony held in Florence. As king, Henri couldn't leave his kingdom, and Marie couldn't leave Florence without becoming a married woman. So he didn't actually attend the ceremony and the marriage was carried out by proxy. The marriage was a last-minute alternative for Henri. He had originally intended to marry his mistress of many years, Gabrielle d'Estrées, and the two were supposed to be wed on Easter Day in 1599. However, Henri's hopes were dashed when d'Estrées, 5 months pregnant at the time, suddenly took ill and died giving birth to a stillborn baby boy. As Henri had no heir from his first wife, he needed a woman whom could give him sons, and Marie's family had a reputation on both sides of her family for being exceptionally fertile. The huge dowry of 600,000 crowns she brought with her didn't hurt either. Marie's children became the next generation of European royal powers. Marie quickly went about fulfilling her duties as a royal broodmare. She gave birth to the long-awaited heir to the throne, the future Louis XIII, in 1601. Louis was a sickly child with a number of ailments, both mental and physical, which worried the doctors. Many feared he would not live to sit upon the throne, but Marie made certain to provide both an heir and a spare. Over the course of nearly a decade, she produced 6 children, 5 of whom survived to adulthood, an impressive ratio for the time regardless of social rank and wealth. Her eldest daughter became Queen of Spain, her second the Duchess of Savoy, and the youngest, Henrietta Maria, married Charles I and became Queen of England. Meanwhile, her other son Gaston, who was also clearly her favorite, spent the rest of his life lurking around the French court enjoying his royal privileges. He didn't spend this time idly, however. More than once he fomented rebellion against his brother with ill-advised attempts at seizing the throne. Marie resented her husband's numerous affairs and he hated her Italian friends. Despite producing several children together, Henri and Marie had a tumultuous marriage. Henri was known for keeping a bawdy court, and his wife's existence didn't change that. He continued to take mistresses and sleep with other women as though nothing had happened. He had his favorites like Gabrielle d'Estrées, but after she died, he made Henriette d'Entraigues his official mistress. Marie, understandably, mistrusted and resented any and all women in her husband's proximity, but it was hard for her to escape their existence. Many of his mistresses produced children who were raised at the royal court alongside Henri and Marie's legitimate children. On the flip side, Henri took issue with Marie's Italian entourage, notably Concino Concini, an adventurer with a knack for annoying the French, and his wife Leonora Galigai, one of Marie's childhood friends. Marie was extremely generous with money and favors with her Italian friends, breeding mistrust and jealousy at the royal court. The fact that Galigai was accused of witchcraft didn't help matters. Marie seized power when her husband was conveniently assassinated. During his life, Henri tried to find a balance between the warring religious factions, which in turn made him all the more hated by fanatics. He survived over 20 assassination attempts but was finally struck down by a zealous Catholic on May 14, 1610. Stabbed twice. He died immediately and his young son, Louis, became king. Since Louis was too young to rule, Marie became regent and ruled on his behalf. This transfer of royal authority didn't happen smoothly. Marie's rise to power was in fact quite suspicious. The day before Henry's assassination, Marie was finally crowned Queen of France after nearly 10 years of marriage. It would have been very difficult for Marie to attempt to rule without this significant religious ceremony, which established her as Queen of France before God and the kingdom. It seemed a little too coincidental that she was confirmed in her role only 24 hours before her husband's death paved the way for her to seize power. Louis overthrew his mother's regime and murdered her favorites. Marie was supposed to serve as Queen Regent only until Louis came of age at 13, but she held on to power far longer than she was supposed to by continually demeaning her son in public and refusing to allow him any part in politics. During her rule, Marie continued to show favor to her Italian associates, Concino Concini and Leonore Galigai. Concini was elevated to the position of Marquis d'Ancre and became her closest advisor. With his help, Marie reversed years of anti-Spanish foreign policy. She was a Habsburg on her mother's side, and established an alliance with the imperial family, going so far as to cement the peace with a marriage between her son and the Spanish Infanta, Anne of Austria. Marie also took on Armand-Jean du Plessis de Richelieu as an advisor, and he worked with both the Queen Regent and Concini. During all of this, Marie emptied the royal treasury with her lavish lifestyle, readily gave up royal power to the nobles when she was even slightly intimidated, and fomented general instability both at the court and in France at large. Marie's popularity plummeted day by day. Even Marie's son, Louis, didn't like his mother's behavior. He knew his rightful place was on the throne, leading the kingdom. He watched from the sidelines, biding his time for the right moment to strike. Finally, in the early hours of April 24, 1617, Louis XIII and his close friend, Charles de Luynes, initiated a palace coup. Concini was assassinated, his wife beheaded for witchcraft and her remains burned, and Marie was placed under house arrest before being exiled to the Château de Blois. She made a daring escape under the cover of night. Marie wasn't the kind to sit idly by and watch as the kingdom she ran for years was wrenched away from her. At the Château de Blois, she plotted her return to power with the help of the few nobles who remained loyal to her. After 2 years of waiting, she made her escape from Blois on the night of February 21 or 22, 1619. With the help of a group of soldiers and her maids, the queen was lowered down onto a ladder by rope from a high tower, then proceeded to climb down. That is, until she got stuck. Paralyzed with fear, Marie couldn't move and the soldiers were forced to carry her down from the ladder. When they finally got her to the ground, she was mistaken by a group of passing guards for a prostitute, and Marie had the good humor to find it amusing when they inquired how much an evening with her would cost. The escape was almost a complete failure. When they had gotten a number of miles away from the chateau, Marie realized she had left behind a casket of jewels she intended to sell to finance the necessary armies to wage war against her son. Without them, her fight would be over before it had begun. She ordered the carriage to turn around, and miraculously the jewel case was still sitting in the grass where she'd forgotten it. Richelieu turned on her and became Louis XIII's chief advisor. Marie's relationship with her protégé Richelieu was mutually beneficial to both parties at first. Richelieu served as Secretary of State and was one of the most prominent clergymen in France. After Marie escaped confinement and threatened to bring war against her son in 1619, Richelieu was called in to broker a peace between mother and son, which he accomplished with the Treaty of Angoulême. According to this agreement, Marie would remain free, have her own court, and be allowed to participate on the royal council. Richelieu made an impression on the young king, and soon became one of his closest advisors. With Marie and Louis XIII's support, Richelieu was elevated to the position of cardinal in 1622. During the early 1620s, Richelieu was a fundamental force behind Louis XIII's policies and actions against Huguenots, or French Protestants. He conspired against the king's chief minister, Charles de la Vieuville, and brought him down with charges of corruption in 1624. After that, Richelieu succeeded him as France's effective prime minister. Richelieu is regarded by many historians as the founder of French absolutism, and Louis XIV and other future monarchs were greatly influenced by his reign. To honor her power, Marie constructed a magnificent palace. Once Marie was at peace with her son, she set her sights on building an elaborate palace in Paris to glorify her position. Marie referenced her Italian upbringing for the designs. It was inspired by the Palazzo Pitti in Florence. Construction on the Luxembourg Palace began in 1615, but building came to a halt when Marie fell out of favor. However, she was free to return to the project during the relatively peaceful period of the 1620s. Architect Salomon de Brosse built the palace and its famous gardens along the left bank of the Seine. Since 1958, it has been the French Senate's headquarters. Rubens produced a collection of 24 masterworks to tell her story. In one wing of the Luxembourg Palace, Marie established a special gallery to display a series of paintings by Baroque master Peter Paul Rubens. A visual biography of her life was the goal of the commission of the 24 masterpieces at the beginning of the 1620s. Known as the Marie de Medici cycle, the paintings allegorically represent significant events in her life, including her marriage by proxy, the death of her husband and proclamation of her regency, and her negotiations at Angoulême. She also ordered a series of paintings that would tell the story of her husband, Henri IV, but they were never finished. The paintings were an early practice in public relations. The visual biography they created was hardly a true telling of events. Marie was made out to be the savior of France over and over again, when in fact she nearly drove the country into the ground on more than one occasion. Richelieu began working against Marie. Despite making peace with her son, Marie's position in France declined again during the late 1620s. King Louis XIII and Richelieu systematically undid everything she had done as Queen Regent, which infuriated Marie. Richelieu was instrumental in shifting France back to a position in opposition to the Spanish and the Habsburg Empire, essentially turning on Marie. She conspired against Richelieu with her younger son, Gaston d'Orléans, but the cardinal proved to be too powerful for the Dowager Queen to topple. She had the blood of the wealthy Medicis and imperial Habsburgs in her veins. Marie was the daughter of Francesco de' Medici, Grand Duke of Tuscany, and Joanna of Austria. Born in 1575, she was one of 7 children, although only 2 survived to adulthood. Marie's family descended from Lorenzo de' Medici the Elder, and was part of the so-called cadet branch of the family. This branch produced 2 centuries' worth of Tuscan dukes, and later numerous French kings, and participated in Medici affairs but had limited political influence. Marie's mother, Joanna of Austria, was a member of the powerful Habsburg family and the daughter of Holy Roman Emperor Ferdinand I. It was this royal blood, along with her huge dowry and family reputation for fertility, that guaranteed her marriage to the French king. The day of the dupes toppled Marie for good. Marie did whatever she could to discredit and get rid of Richelieu. On November 10, 1630, in a moment of unbridled anger, Marie let loose a torrent of abuse against the cardinal, laying down every charge she could think of before her son. Louis left the room without saying a word, which Marie took as a good sign. She believed her son would dismiss his chief minister, and she made a point of letting everyone at court know she was the true power behind the throne, not Richelieu. The court flocked to Marie's apartments to pay their fawning respect to the woman everyone believed would control the future of France, but it was a mistake. When Louis XIII visited his mother the next day, she expected him to announce Richelieu's demise. Instead, on what has forever been remembered as the Day of Dupes, Louis XIII chose Richelieu over his mother. He made his second formal break with Marie, who was arrested and later exiled from France. In 1631, Marie was banished, winding up in the Spanish Netherlands before making her way to Cologne. Marie died a broken woman, dependent on the generosity of Rubens. During the last 11 years of her life, Marie was destitute, having fallen from royalty to a life in exile. In 1642, Marie died in Cologne, where she was living at the expense of Peter Paul Rubens, the same man whom had once glorified her life so majestically. She was followed to the grave only a few months later by Richelieu, and then by her son in 1643. After Marie passed away, her body was interred in the Parisian Royal Basilica of Saint Denis. This was the only time she ever went back to France. Right until the end of her life, she never stopped rallying against Richelieu, producing pamphlets against him and his tyranny, until she drew her final breath as a beggar in a far-off country. When Marie de Medici, a daughter of the powerful Italian banking dynasty, married King Henri IV in 1600, France was a nation fractured by decades of religious strife and civil war. Their union was one of the most tumultuous royal marriages in history, marked by mutual distrust, political maneuvering, and outright hostility. Marie, though not born a royal, was a woman of immense ambition, and she bided her time as her husband struggled to stabilize a kingdom teetering on the brink of collapse. For 10 years, she endured the humiliations of Henry's infidelities and the precariousness of her position, waiting for the moment when she could seize control. That moment came in 1610, when, just one day after her long-delayed coronation as Queen of France, Henri IV was assassinated by a fanatical Catholic, leaving Marie as regent for their young son, Louis XIII. What followed was a reign of iron-fisted authority, lavish excess, and disastrous political decisions that would ultimately lead to her spectacular downfall. A woman who rose from obscurity to rule one of Europe's most powerful kingdoms only to end her days as a destitute exile, dependent on the charity of the painter Peter Paul Rubens, Marie de Medici's story is one of breathtaking ambition and catastrophic miscalculation. Henri IV's marriage to Marie was born out of necessity rather than affection. After the annulment of his first marriage to Marguerite de Valois, Henri had intended to wed his longtime mistress, Gabrielle d'Estrées, who had already borne him several children. But fate intervened when d'Estrées died suddenly in 1599, leaving Henri without an heir and in desperate need of a fertile, wealthy bride. Marie de Medici, with her vast dowry of 600,000 crowns and a family renowned for its fertility, became the logical choice. The marriage was conducted by proxy in Florence, with Henri notably absent, a telling sign of the emotional distance that would define their union. Marie's primary responsibility was to produce heirs, which she accomplished with remarkable efficiency. She gave birth to 6 children, 5 of whom lived to adulthood, a remarkable achievement in a time when infant mortality was high. Among her offspring were future monarchs and consorts of Europe: Louis XIII of France, Elizabeth, Queen of Spain, Christine, Duchess of Savoy, and Henrietta Maria, Queen of England. Yet despite her success as a royal mother, Marie's marriage was fraught with tension. Henry's numerous mistresses, particularly Henriette d'Entraigues, openly flaunted their influence at court, while Marie retaliated by surrounding herself with Italian advisors, most notably the controversial Concino Concini and his wife, Leonora Galigai, whose presence bred resentment among the French nobility. Henri IV's assassination in 1610 was a pivotal moment in Marie's life, one that many historians have viewed with suspicion. The timing was uncanny. Just a day after her coronation, which solidified her legitimacy as queen, Henri was stabbed to death by François Ravaillac, a fanatical Catholic opposed to the king's religious policies. Although it is still up for debate whether or not Marie was involved in the assassination, it is undeniable that she benefited greatly from his death. As regent for the 9-year-old Louis XIII, Marie wielded absolute power, and she did so with a heavy hand. She reversed Henry's anti-Spanish foreign policy, aligning France with the Habsburgs, a move that angered many, given Spain's long-standing rivalry with France. She further alienated the nobility by elevating her Italian favorites, particularly Concini, to positions of immense influence, while draining the royal treasury with her extravagant spending. The kingdom was in a state of perpetual unrest during her regency, which was marked by instability as she alternated between authoritarian rule and submission to noble demands. The breaking point came in 1617, when the teenage Louis XIII, long sidelined and humiliated by his mother, orchestrated a dramatic coup. With the help of his favorite, Charles de Luynes, Louis ordered the assassination of Concini, who was gunned down in the Louvre courtyard. Leonora Galigai was arrested, tried for witchcraft, and executed. Her body burned at the stake. Marie herself was placed under house arrest and later exiled to the Château de Blois. But Marie was not one to accept defeat quietly. In 1619, she staged a daring escape, climbing down a rope ladder from her tower in the dead of night, only to freeze in terror halfway down, forcing her rescuers to carry her the rest of the way. In a moment of dark humor, she was mistaken by guards for a prostitute, a far cry from her former glory as queen. Her escape nearly failed when she realized she had left behind a casket of jewels meant to fund her rebellion, but in a stroke of luck, she recovered them and rallied supporters to wage war against her own son. For a time, it seemed Marie might regain power. She reconciled with Louis through the Treaty of Angoulême, brokered by her former protégé, Cardinal Richelieu. But Richelieu, a master of political survival, soon abandoned her, recognizing that his future lay with Louis XIII. Marie's final attempt at rebellion, the Day of the Dupes in 1630, ended in disaster when Richelieu outmaneuvered her, convincing Louis to banish her permanently. Stripped of her titles and wealth, Marie fled France, wandering from court to court in search of refuge. Spain and England turned her away, and even her daughter, Queen Henrietta Maria of England, could offer little help. In her final years, the once mighty queen was reduced to poverty, living in a Cologne hovel and relying on the charity of Rubens, the artist who had once glorified her in grand Baroque paintings. She died in 1642, forgotten and penniless, a stark contrast to the opulence of her reign. Marie de Medici's legacy is a paradox. She was a patron of the arts, commissioning Rubens' magnificent Marie de Medici cycle, which immortalized her life in glowing, allegorical splendor. Yet her political failures were just as monumental. Her reign exposed the dangers of nepotism, fiscal irresponsibility, and blind ambition in an era when absolute monarchy was still taking shape. Her catastrophic downfall serves as a cautionary tale, a reminder that even the most powerful rulers can be undone by their own hubris. From the heights of royal authority to the depths of destitution, Marie de Medici's life was a Shakespearean tragedy of rise and ruin, a story that continues to fascinate centuries later.